My next guest, I'm very happy again to invite onto our virtual stage, is Roger Harrop. He's the author of Staying in the Helicopter, and he spent over 25 years leading international businesses, which put him in a unique position to deal with present-day business challenges. Over 30,000 CEOs and business leaders in nearly 50 countries have achieved transformation through his thought-provoking, entertaining talks laced with real-life stories and humor. I'm very happy right now to bring on Roger. Roger, it's such a pleasure to see you.
Hey, Stephen, lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm good. Well, we're communicating across many thousands of miles, but it looks like you're right in the room with me.
Isn't technology amazing?
It is, it is. So again, thank you so much for being with us for this program. And let me begin by asking you, I get a very clear image from the title of your book, Staying in the Helicopter. How did you arrive at that perspective?
Well, you know, as leaders, often we fall into the trap of thinking we need to know everything. You know, we need to know exactly what's going on. We need to have all the answers. And before we know where we are, we're down there in the mud and the bullets in the detail. And of course, that's not where we should be. Where we need to be as leaders, we need to be spending a majority of our time up there in the helicopter, up there looking at the big picture. And today, more than ever before, we need to be looking over the horizon at what's coming next apart from anything else. You know, I find myself often saying to CEOs when we're discussing this, I said, look, just try it. You know, the next time you've got a major problem or a major task that needs doing, get your team together, give them the task, give them the problem, and say, okay, at this time, I want you to return, and I want you to give us no more than 3 alternatives as to the route we're going to move forward from here to solve the problem, to complete the task. And then you stand back, you get in that helicopter, and you know, the first thing is, it's amazing what you can see from that helicopter. And of course, you can be looking much more at strategy. You know, we all know about, it's not today's battle, it's the whole war that's important, or whatever it might be. And that's what we need to be doing as leaders. And I would argue very strongly that these days, with change happening just so quickly, that it's more important than ever before.
Mm-hmm. The first thing that occurs to me as you talk about a leader telling the team to go ahead and work on a problem, I'm going to step away, is, wow, it seems to me that would take a leader who's able to let go, where most leaders want to be in such control. Can you talk about that perhaps quality of leadership, and if you do find this in a lot of leaders, or if that in and of itself, to be able to take a step back, is something that you have to first work with leaders to be able to do?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, obviously, some leaders find it easier than others. Some people are intuitive leaders. But yeah, what I find is, firstly, you've got to talk about this whole concept of, it's all about personal leadership rather than positional leadership. You know, it isn't because you've got that chair that you're sitting in. It's about you, and it's about you enabling your team to perform. That's what it's all about. It's all about having some humility. Now, all those things can be pretty difficult. And you've got to give yourself permission, and we heard some of that just now, to show yourself, to be authentic. You know, don't pretend to act in a particular way just because you've got that job title. And that does happen to, you know, some of us, a number of us. And I think that's where someone outside, like myself, or it might even be an independent director, or whoever it might be, a mentor who's just encouraging CEOs, particularly when we're talking about new CEOs, to give themselves permission to not know all that detail and to trust the team because that's really what it's all about. It's not about micromanagement. It's all about trusting that team to come back with those answers. This isn't you abrogating your responsibility, because of course at the end you are making the decision jointly and you are adding to that from a strategic perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very important. And I'm wondering, as the expert coming in, what kind of things do you do to help a leader to be willing to do that?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of techniques one can use. I mean, I guess I have the example like you, Stephen, of having grey hair. So we've been there and done it a few times, and I'm able to tell stories. I'm able to quote examples. You know, for 25 years, I was a tutor on, I guess it would be Europe's leading experiential leadership program. And basically what I would have would be 8 or 9 people who were the delegates, who were the team, who were together for 5 days, day and night, as it were. And during those 5 days, they would go through a whole series of projects. Some would be cerebral, some would be physical. They would take turns being leader, they would take turns being follower. And I would be in the room trying to say as little as possible. My job was to enable them and to maybe move them one way or another. And going through that process, it was really very interesting to watch over all those years, people coming to the realization that they didn't need to do it all. You know, so often when they were made leader, they were in a state, you know, they really were wound up about it. Whereas just by standing back, that firstly gives you the space, and giving them the task, giving you the space to actually grip yourself, to get a hold of yourself and make sure you're putting yourself in that right position. And many other things that came from that experience. And what I find is sharing stories, sharing real life situations, and also some of my own, because, you know, I was a CEO of all kinds of businesses, all kinds of sizes of businesses. And I think, you know, for me to share with some of the mistakes that I made and some of the mistakes other people have made, I think that's what people need to see and hear. And of course, you don't necessarily get that from learning about leadership by looking at YouTube, which is often the way these days people do learn stuff. You know, you don't necessarily get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Our last guest, Jerry Colonna, talked about psychological space. That was one of the concepts he's mentioned,
Absolutely.
Which is something I think is very important. And when you talk about coming from a helicopter perspective, it also gives you the opportunity to have some psychological space as well.
Sure.
Breathing room, time to allow some things to sink in before having to make quick judgments. So one of the things I find with some leaders who get into trouble very easily, very quickly, is they feel they have to jump on something. They feel nervous about having to perform, having to create a result. And so they may act or react before they really see the full picture. They may make judgments prematurely without seeing the full picture as well. So I can appreciate the concept and the perspective that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's very easy that they feel they're on parade, as it were, and they need to be seen to be performing as leaders. And you know what? They don't. We don't.
Yeah. Let me ask you about a concept in one of the diagrams that you have in your book with the heading of team performance. Surrounding it, you have individual personal power, atmosphere, culture, relationships, and leadership.
Yeah.
These variables relate to what might be referred to as, I would refer to as emotional intelligence.
Sure.
Can you explain how you derive team performance from these other concepts you have surrounding it?
Yeah, sure. I guess the starting point is to say, and obviously I'm always talking about business rather than other contexts, and that includes charities and not-for-profit. But to be absolutely blunt, people cost an awful lot of money. We don't have hire and fire societies anymore anywhere in the world. You know, your people are a fixed asset. You need to recruit the very best people, and you need to motivate them, all the other stuff. But at the end of the day, what you need around your organization are truly performing teams. And what I mean by that is where the team is more than the sum of the parts. And in order to achieve that, those 4 areas that I've mentioned there are the areas that you need to think about. Firstly, the people themselves. And you know, again, I find an awful lot of people when they're recruiting, either internally or externally, to join a team, they only look at their skills, their technical skills, whatever they might be. But of course, equally important are our behavioral profiles. You know, within any team, we need, now I'm not sure if you know about Professor Meredith Belbin and Belbin's team roles in the US, but that's the one that I particularly like. I mean, there are many others, but for example, you know, in any team, you must have a completer finisher. You must have someone who dots the I's and crosses the T's and will not let the team move forward until that is done. It doesn't matter what their technical skill is, but you need that sort of a person. You equally need a creative person, one that's going to come up with all the maybe 99% of them are wacky ideas, but there's one that is the key to solving the problem in the best way, and so on. So those behavioral profiles I would see as being just as important as any others. And if I may again, just a little story. I was independent director on a large family business, and the chairman said to me, would I please, you know, recruit a new finance VP that we needed, finance director. And I did the usual thing, prepared a job spec, and I put on there all the usual things about skills, but I also put that we needed a completer finisher. And I talked to the board and everyone agreed that we needed a completer finisher. And I always remember we recruited this guy, Jerry, and it was probably about three months after he started, the chairman was talking to me and he said, Roger, he's just such a fabulous appointment, Jerry. You know, he's made such a difference. The board is performing better now than it ever did before. And that's really down to Jerry. And I said, yes, it is, but it's not down to his technical skills. It's not just because he's a very good finance guy. It's because he's a completer finisher, and we did not have that role in the team before. So that's one area. It's the people. The leadership, you know, us guys, our job is to provide direction, structure, motivation, and organization. That's our job. And that's what we've got to make sure that we do for any team as leaders. But there's something else, the relationships, you mentioned those. The relationships between the team members, that's all about mutual trust, respect, and support. And I guess all of us can think of sports teams where, you know, the owners have gone out and hired the best at whatever cost, but the team doesn't perform. Well, the team doesn't perform because you've got a load of prima donnas, you've got a load of people who are not team players, and they do not trust each other, they do not respect each other, and they probably don't support each other. And we've seen that out there, and that applies to us as well. So we've got to avoid falling into the trap of just getting the technically best people in there. And we've got to develop a whole atmosphere and culture within that team where there is this mutual trust, respect, and support. And those are the keys: leadership, relationships, culture and atmosphere, and the people. You get those 4 things right, you stand a very good chance of having a team that is more than the sum of the parts. And if you've ever been a member of a performing team, it's wonderful. You know, it's a whole new world that you're in where you can just move mountains.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of an issue that I come in connection with very frequently, which has to do with how people feel a sense of value in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And frequently, we only look toward one or two dimensions in which to determine whether we value ourselves. And what I'm hearing from the way you describe a team, in that each person in that team plays a different role,
Yeah.
it gives a much greater range from which people can find value.
That's right.
One person may be valuable to the team because they're able to better connect other members of the team. They're able to, or they're able to see something in someone else.
Absolutely.
Someone else does.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's absolutely right. You have people, and those people are vitally important. You need those within a team, but not, you don't want everyone to be a people person, but those people maybe automatically are seeing. You can have a member of a team that's whatever, is coming to work that day and has had hell at home, whatever it might be. And these people are perceptive of that. They're perceptive of how people are feeling, and they're likely to be the ones that go and put, metaphorically or physically, an arm around that other team member for the benefit of the team.
Right.
Right. There's other people who are the opposite of people. They are things people, and they are equally important. These two people probably will never understand each other in a million years, but they respect what each other brings to the team, and that's the really important thing.
Mm-hmm. Can you say one of the pieces there is atmosphere culture?
Yeah.
Can you say something about how a leader creates good atmosphere culture for better performance?
Yeah. I certainly believe that in any organization, sooner or later, the culture of the organization reflects the leader. It's a fact of life. No matter how small or large the organization is, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So the leader needs to be aware of that. And for example, you might have a leader who's a very laid back leader who tends to be quiet, tends to not get excited. That will eventually tend to be the culture of the organization. And let's be perfectly honest, there may be some people who feel they don't fit into that because it doesn't suit them. The other extreme might be the sort of leader that is highly dynamic, that is really going for it. A lot of entrepreneurs are that sort. They just keep moving forward and making stuff happen and leaving some sort of devastation in their wake that's swept up by others. And again, there will be some people that doesn't suit. So that culture is all coming from the leader, whether you like it or not. That's where it emanates from. And you need to be aware of that. And I think also you need to be aware that that might work for some people and may not work for others, but that doesn't mean you should necessarily change, but you just need to be aware of it. It's that word I used a few moments ago. It's about perception. As a leader, I would say one of the skills we need is that perception of people. I think it's something that has been highly underrated, but I think it's highly important for any leader in any position to learn and work on those perception skills.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Roger. You discussed three-dimensional leadership.
Yes, indeed.
The three attributes of successful leaders. Can you give the audience a sense of that and maybe some examples, please?
Yes, of course. It's very easy to us to assume leadership is downwards. It's for us to those beneath us, and so on. But of course, in reality, leadership is three-dimensional. The most difficult leadership is upwards leadership. It's telling our boss, those above us, perhaps what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And I should certainly quote an example. When I had the very first time I ran a business at a very tender age of 31 or something like that, my chairman, my boss, was a guy in his 60s, and he was an accountant, and he was very risk averse. And I guess in his mind, he'd taken a massive risk recruiting me. And the way he dealt with that was, and it was an international company, so I was out of the office an awful lot, traveling the world or whatever it might be. Every time I was out of the office, he would go into the company, meet with my guys, my top team, and tell them to do the opposite of what I was doing often. And I would come back and there would be chaos. And I have to be honest, you're a young guy. I was pretty frightened. Let's use that word. I was pretty frightened to confront this. And it's something that was being talked about earlier. You know, actually confronting things is something difficult for us all to do. But I read the books, I talked to some people, I talked to a mentor I had, and they said, you know, it's all about assertiveness. You know, assertiveness, there's 3 rules, as we probably all know. Confront early. If you want to say yes, say yes. If you want to say no, say no. And I sort of took that on board. And if you like, from a transaction analysis point of view, the other thing you've got to do is to remove the emotion. You've got to be straight. So I got myself ready for this. I went and saw my chairman, and I just stuck with the facts. And this was quite difficult for me, not to in any way bring any emotion into it, any feelings into it. But I stuck with the facts, and I said, this is what is happening. The result of that is this. And it was not just the fact that there was chaos. It was probably the fact that I was starting to ignore my boss, which wasn't sound either. Anyway, I went through this, having built myself up for it and having lost a night's sleep. And I was just waiting for the explosion. And you know what? He said, Roger, thank you. You are absolutely right. And that turned into the best boss relationship I have ever had before or since. So that's what you've got to do. It's your job to be as effective as you can be. And that involves leading those above you as well. Mm-hmm. The other dimension is outwards. It's your peers, you know, and it's perfectly reasonable to be saying to your peers, you know, that was a great idea. Well done, whatever it might be. You've got to lead them as well. We talked just now about within a team, having people who have technical skills, but also have other skills. And you're leading them also. So you may be saying, look, you're the completer finisher in the group, or you're the creative in the group, you know, Fred, Sheila, whoever it might be, you know, I want to hear from you. Let's give you some space. Let's hear what you've got to say. And that doesn't matter how wacky it is, doesn't matter what it is, you know. And that's leadership. That's leading people who may be on the same level as you, rather than reporting to you, or you are reporting to. So those 3 levels of leadership, I would argue all 3 are just as important.
Yeah, thank you. Let's sort of bring this conversation to date now, and maybe you could tell us what factors you've noticed have helped companies and leaders get through the pandemic successfully.
Good question, Stephen. I'd actually, if I may, can I address, as it were, sort of post-pandemic? Getting through the pandemic, I'll come back to that if I may, because
sure.
You know, I'm very aware that all around the world we're at different stages, but certainly here in the UK, I was just reading today, everyone over the age of 38 now has been vaccinated, and by July the whole country will be. And we really are. We've just been released this week, you know, to do things we couldn't do before, and it does feel like things are really happening again. And I'm worried. I'm worried about leaders, particularly business leaders, because things have changed, and some things have changed dramatically, in my view. And I think the first thing I am saying to business leaders is, throughout this last 12 months, we've all been anxious. Every single one of us has been anxious. We've been anxious we might get COVID. We've been worried about our relations. We've been worried about our family. We may have been worried about our job, whether we're going to have a job still. We may be worried about our business. But all of us have had an accelerated level of anxiety. So we need to be aware of that as leaders. Everyone in our company, everyone in our organization has still got probably a level of anxiety they didn't have before. All our suppliers, all our customers, all the people we react with, every single one of them is a human being that has gone through this without exception. And as leaders, I think we need to take that into account. And that involves maybe doing more of the human bit of asking people genuinely how they are, not just for the sake of it, but show you are interested in them and their family, no matter what the business relationship might be. And maybe others can say more things about that than me, but I think that's the first thing. The second one I would say is something that was already happening, I think has been accelerated. Throughout the world, people have been working from home in a way that they've never done before. As leaders, we've had to deal with that. Companies have had to deal with that. And what I want to say is, for all of us, please, no stupid rules. What do I mean by that? Well, let me tell you a little story, if I may, Stephen. I was working, this is before the pandemic, I was going to do a masterclass for a charity, an air ambulance charity. And I was going to see the CEO and the VP of HR for a briefing. And I got there and they were late meeting with me. And they said, look, sorry, Roger, sorry we're late, but it's just been a bit traumatic. We've just had to give a formal warning to a woman, and it's really upset us. So I said, well, why? Why has it upset us? And they said, well, you know, she's really good at her job. She's only she's a relatively young woman, but she's outstanding at her job. But she never comes to work on time. We've told her, time and time again, but she won't come to work on time. So now we've given her a formal warning. So I said, okay, so why does she have to come into work at 9:30? And they said, well, that's our rule. I said, why? And there was no answer. And I said, look, young people in particular, but increasingly it's all of us, we will not follow a rule unless we understand why it's there. And if you can't tell us why it's there, we won't follow it. Now, you're in danger of losing an extremely good employee here just because you've got stupid rules. And they sort of blinked at me and I said, I'm sorry, you need to do that. You need to think about why those rules are in place. Now, that I think now applies to all of us. We have proved that people can work at home and we can trust them to work at home. We don't have to check what time they're working. We don't have to do all that. Now, of course, we're going to have a set of rules about, you know, if there's going to be meetings, for example, that people come to meetings on time and all that. But we need to now assess, in my opinion, all the rules we've got in our organization and see if they really make sense for now, not a year ago or 10 years or 50 years ago. And I think the other thing that sort of goes with all this, is, as far as the post-pandemic is concerned, is change. There is massive change.
Yes.
I guess we all know retail was bricks and mortar retail was declining. That's accelerated through all this. We need to deal with it, and there's lots of other things like that. I think these are such good and important points that leaders have to lead the way with, and maybe the next time we can talk more about those things, but I wanted to thank you for your wisdom that you've shared with the audience today. And Roger, I look forward to the next time we have an opportunity to discuss more about leadership. Me too, Stephen. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.